Don't drink that, and don't put it down. My husband lifted the glass out of my hand in the middle of 40 of his relatives. I laughed. Wes has many fine qualities. Spontaneous comedy has never been one of them. 7 seconds earlier, I'd been standing on my mother-in-law's back lawn, holding a cup of sangria, listening to a second cousin explain why Harford County property assessments were a personal insult aimed at him. What? Wes didn't smile. You didn't see who handed you that? Of course I did. I turned toward the drink table. Beau wasn't there. That was strange. He'd been standing beside me 30 seconds before, and Wes was holding my cup away from his body with a paper napkin wrapped around it. The way you handle something you don't want your prints on. Let me back up. I had brought potato salad. I always bring potato salad. I set it down between somebody's macaroni bake and a store-bought veggie tray, and nobody said a word about it. Margo hosts. Margo's sons carry chairs. Margo's daughter refills things. I bring potato salad, and I bring it well. We had been there 40 minutes. Beau Prentice came across the grass with 2 cups, walking like a man who'd decided in advance I'd be glad to see him. I'd met him twice. 49, pressed shirt, good teeth. The kind of man who remembers your name and makes you feel faintly guilty for reaching for his Nora, right? Depends. Are you selling something? He laughed. I figured you might need rescuing. He tipped his head toward my second cousin, who had moved on to explaining reassessment cycles. You may have saved my life. He handed me the sangria. Then came the questions. Was I still with the school district? Was Junie living up in D? Now? Did Wes still travel as much as he used to? Did I usually beat him home in the evenings? None of it sounded strange while it was happening. People ask questions at family cookouts because the alternative is the weather or somebody's knee replacement. I answered all 4, easily. The way you answer a pleasant man in your mother-in-law's backyard on a Saturday in June. Now my husband stood in front of me holding my drink, wearing an expression I'd seen maybe 4 times in 19 years. Where did he go? I don't know. Wes, what is happening? Go get Junie. Get your bag. We're leaving. I stared at him. Your mother spent 3 weeks planning this. I know. We've been here 40 minutes. I know. His eyes moved past me. 30-some relatives at picnic tables, kids at the cornhole boards, Grady at the grill, arguing about whether a burger could be medium rare without becoming a public health event. Everything looked exactly the way it was supposed to look. Wes leaned in slightly. Nora, please, just this once. That got me moving. You have to understand something about my husband. Wes had been with the Bureau 22 years. He was careful about work, and I respected that. I'd stopped asking questions I knew he couldn't answer around year 6, but Wes almost never said please with that face on. I found Junie near the kitchen door. She's 22 and had recently reached the age where a family reunion is something you endure in exchange for free food. Grab your bag. Why? Your father. She nodded. Apparently that was sufficient. On our way to the car, I glanced toward the side of the house, past the hose reel. Beau was there. So was Grady. They stood close enough together that they clearly were not discussing baseball. Grady said something. Beau answered. Then Grady looked up and saw me watching. He stepped back, 1 step, quick. The way you do when a door opens behind you. Beau turned too. For about a second, we looked at each other. Then Wes touched my elbow. Car. We left without saying goodbye to Margo, and I knew we'd pay for that later. Wes drove. Junie sat in the back with her phone face down on her knee, which should have told me something. We made it 1.5 miles before my daughter said, He asked me about Grandma. Wes found her in the mirror. Asked you what? Whether she still lives alone. Wes didn't say anything at all for the next 2 miles. And it was the silence that frightened me, not the question. Wes set his keys on the counter and said, I've seen his face before. Where? I'm not allowed to say. I waited. 19 years teaches you that waiting sometimes works. It didn't. He said it again, slower, the way you repeat a fact you can't soften. Nora, I'm not allowed to say where. I'm not going to give you a name, and I'm not going to tell you what it's connected to. You took a drink out of my hand in front of 40 people. I know. You rushed our daughter out of your mother's yard. I know. Is he dangerous? He was quiet a second too long. I don't know. I opened the refrigerator and took out 3 bottles of water. Screw caps, factory seal, nobody's fingers on them but mine. I set one in front of him and one at Junie's place, and I didn't explain why. And he didn't ask, and that was its own kind of conversation. The doorbell rang. Tessa came in before Wes had the door all the way open. Tessa is his sister, 4 years younger, and she has never once in her life entered a room quietly. What is wrong with you? Tessa, you text me at 4 in the afternoon telling me not to leave with Beau. You won't say why. And then you disappear from Mom's reunion like somebody yelled fire. She looked at me. Are you okay? I think so. You think so? Welcome to my evening. She turned back to her brother. You've never liked him. This isn't about whether I like him. You've met him twice. So have I said, and he asked me 4 questions in 90 seconds. He's friendly. That's not a crime. Tessa put her bag down hard on the table. Do you know what he does when I walk up to a table? He stands. Every time. He pulls out my chair. He knows I take coffee with 1 sugar, and he has never once gotten it wrong. I didn't say anything to that. What I thought was this. Manipulative people would be so much easier to recognize if they were unpleasant all the time. Tessa, Wes said. What name did he give you? She frowned. What? His full name. Beau Prentice. Why are you asking me that? He looked at me, then back at her, and then he said nothing at all, which I understood was the most he could do, and which she heard as an accusation. His phone rang. Grady. Wes put it on speaker. What the hell happened over there? No hello. Grady is Wes's older brother, and hello has never been part of his equipment. I'm sorting it out. Mom's been on the phone with me for an hour. People noticed you leave. They'll survive. Look, I don't know what you think you saw, but the guy's been good to your sister. Don't turn him into a criminal because he handed Nora a sangria. Something in Wes's face changed. Not much. If you didn't know him, you'd miss it. How do you know what he handed her? Silence on the line. 4 seconds, maybe 5. Tessa told me. Tessa shook her head. She looked straight at me and mouthed, I didn't. Or somebody did, Grady said. Everybody's talking. I don't know. All right, I'll call you tomorrow. The call ended, and Tessa said, See, even Grady thinks you're overreacting. Then her phone buzzed on the table between us, and she went still. I knew who it was before she picked it up. She read it twice. Then she turned the screen around and set it down so we could both see, Your brother thinks I'm somebody else. Ask him about your mother's place on the river. Nobody spoke. What does Mom's river house have to do with him? I asked. Nothing. Tessa took the phone back. She sold it last fall. It's not a secret. Wes was already dialing. He put it on speaker. Margo answered on the 4th ring. If this is about leaving without saying goodbye, I haven't decided how offended I am yet. Mom, did you put any of the money from the river house into anything Beau suggested? Nothing. The refrigerator hummed. Tessa looked at the ceiling. "Mom, I heard you. Did you?" And then my mother-in-law said, very clearly, in the voice she uses when she has already decided the conversation is over, "Wesley, I am 74 years old. I do not need your permission to spend my own money." Wes looked at me. I looked at him. Neither of us needed her to say yes. She already had. By 9 the next morning, we were sitting around Margo's kitchen table like the world's least cheerful breakfast club. Grady came in 10 minutes late with a Dunkin' box, apparently under the impression that 6 donuts could restore order to this family. They could not. Roslyn wasn't with him. He said she had a thing. Wes sat across from his mother and put a yellow legal pad on the table. Margo looked at it. "Are you taking notes?" "I want to keep the timeline straight." "You're taking notes. Mom, Wesley, stop talking to me like somebody you interviewed downtown." That was when I stepped in. "Margo, forget his questions." He looked at me. I ignored him. "Just tell me what happened. Start wherever it makes sense to you." She gave her son a pointed look. "See, Nora knows how a conversation works. I have been married long enough to enjoy a victory quietly. Here is what she told us. She sold the River Place last fall, $341,000, which sounds like a fortune until you subtract the agent, the taxes, and the $41,000 she'd put into a roof and a septic system the year before, because you cannot sell a house on the water with a bad septic. What was left was $182,000 earning almost nothing in savings. And she'd complained about that at Christmas the way people do. In January, Beau mentioned he knew someone, a financial advisor named Neil Ashford, worked mostly with conservative investors, retirees. "I am not a retiree," Margo said. Grady blinked. "Mom, you retired 11 years ago. That's an employment status. Grady, not a personality." Despite everything, I smiled. She spoke to Ashford twice by phone, then drove out to his office in Bel Air. There was a receptionist. There were business cards in a brass holder. There were framed licenses on the wall behind his desk, and she stood and read them, because she is that kind of woman. "And how much did you give him?" $182. Tessa sat up. "You put $182,000 into something Beau recommended. Please don't join your brother." "I'm not joining anybody. I didn't know it was that much." "It's my money." "I know." "Then stop saying the number like I bought a racehorse." I had my phone in my hand under the table. I don't know exactly when I'd taken it out. I typed the name in. Neil Ashford, Maryland. It took about 11 seconds. Hi came up. Registration active. Firm listed at an address in Bel Air. 11 years in the business. Under the section where complaints and disciplinary actions would appear, there was a 0. I set the phone in the middle of the table, face up, and slid it toward Margo. Nobody said anything for a while. Tessa picked it up and read the whole thing, then scrolled to the top and read it again. "He's real," she said. "He's real," I said. Margo put on her glasses and read it slower than her daughter had. Then she folded them and set them next to the donut box, and said, in a voice I hadn't heard since Bernie's funeral, "So I gave my money to a real man, at a real office, with real licenses on the wall." "Yes." "Then what exactly are we doing at my table at 9 in the morning?" Grady leaned back in his chair and let out a breath. "I told you. I told all of you." I want to be honest about what happened in that kitchen, because I've thought about it a great many times since. We were relieved, every one of us. You could feel it come into the room like heat through a vent. Tessa's shoulders dropped 2 inches. Margo started asking who wanted coffee. Grady opened the donut box, and my husband sat there with his pen still capped and said, quietly, to nobody in particular. I didn't say he isn't real. Nobody heard him. I heard him. I heard him and I let it go. Because I wanted the coffee and the donuts and the ordinary Sunday morning as much as anyone else at that table did. Tessa stood up and got her bag. At the door, she turned around and looked at her brother. "You're wrong, Wes. Not overprotective, not careful. Wrong. You should think about what that costs the rest of us." Then she left. 3 weeks later, I would still be thinking about how relieved we all were that morning. How good it felt. How fast. The cup sat in a Ziploc bag in the refrigerator in our garage for 4 days. I want you to understand that my husband did not put it there. I did. He wouldn't touch it after that first afternoon. And on the third day, I finally asked him why. Because I can't do anything with it. You work for the FBI. Nora. He put down the mail he wasn't reading. There's no case. Nobody has reported a crime. There's no chain of custody on that cup. It's been in your hand, my hand, and a refrigerator with a carton of eggs. If I walk it into a lab Monday morning, I'm using federal resources on a personal matter, and I lose my badge, not a reprimand, my badge. So it just sits there. I looked at the man I'd been married to for 19 years and understood something I had never once considered. Everything about him I had learned to read as caution. The closed doors, the can't get into it, the 22 years of not answering was also a fence. And the fence didn't only keep me out, it kept him in. He couldn't help us, not with a badge. Anyway, so on Thursday morning, I called out of work. There is a private lab outside Baltimore that will run a toxicology panel on a sample you mail in, the way you'd mail a swab to find out where your great-grandparents came from. Finding it took less time than you'd think. I double-bagged the cup, put it in a padded envelope, and drove to the post office on Union Avenue in Havre de Grace. I stood in line behind a man shipping a car part to Ohio. The woman behind the counter asked if there was anything liquid, fragile, perishable, or hazardous. Perishable, I said. She didn't ask what. She weighed it, printed the label, and told me the total, $285, with the shipping. I paid it out of the checking account that has my name on it and not his. The one I've had since before we met. The one I keep because my mother told me to, and I never asked her why. I carried the receipt to my car and sat with it for a minute. 19 years. That was the first thing I had ever done that my husband did not get to know about first. I didn't feel brave. When people tell these stories afterward, they always sound braver than they were. I felt like a 47-year-old school district employee in a Toyota outside a post office, holding a receipt for $285, wondering if she'd just wasted a week of groceries on nothing. And then, because I was already there, and because my phone was already in my hand, I did the other thing. The listing I'd found at Margo's table had a phone number on it, a main office line, filed with the state. The way it has to be. It was not the number Beau had given her. I noticed that the way you notice a hair on a collar. It meant nothing. Offices have several lines. People give out cell numbers. It meant nothing at all. I dialed it anyway. A woman answered on the second ring. I asked for Neil Ashford. She asked what it was regarding. I said a family member's account, and she put me through without ceremony. This is Neil. His voice was completely ordinary. A man on a Tuesday. Somewhere behind him, a printer was running. Mr. Ashford, my name is Nora Halverson. I'm calling about my mother-in-law's account. Marguerite Halverson. She opened it with you in January? Sure, let me pull that up. Halverson. Is that with a V? Yes, V-E-R. I could hear him typing. It took maybe 8 seconds. 8 seconds is not very long unless you are counting them. The typing stopped. I'm sorry. He said it politely. He said it the way you'd say it to somebody who had dialed the wrong number and simply didn't know it yet. Which Mrs. Halverson? I don't have a client by that name. I said something. I have no idea what. I remember pulling into the gravel shoulder on Route 40, past the Aberdeen exit, and shutting off the engine. I sat there for 9 minutes. I know it was 9, because when I finally looked up at the clock on the dash, I was still holding the receipt. I told them at Margo's table the next evening, all of them at once, because I didn't trust myself to say it twice. Tessa said, "That's not possible." I called the number the state has on file, not the one Beau gave her. Neil Ashford has no client named Halverson. Wes didn't say I told you. I've thought about that a great deal since. He had every right to, and he didn't. He turned to his mother and said, "Mom, I need Nora to ask you some things." So I asked, "How often do your statements come?" "Monthly." Margo said it easily. "Like clockwork." "Who brings them in?" A small pause. "Beau does. He's out this way for work. He picks up my mail and brings it to the door." "How long has he been doing that?" "Since the winter. He noticed I was going down the steps in the ice." I asked the only question that mattered. And I have never wanted so badly to be wrong about something. "Margo, when is the last time you took an envelope from that company out of your own mailbox, with your own hands?" She opened her mouth, then she closed it. She got up. She walked out the front door in her house shoes, down the steps, across the grass, and opened the mailbox and stood there with her hand inside it. It was empty. It was 7 in the evening. Of course it was empty. She stood there a long time anyway, and none of us went out to get her. Wes made the calls the next morning. A change of address had been filed on Marguerite Halverson's mail in February. Everything from the brokerage, every statement, every confirmation, every notice, had gone to a rented box in Bel Air for 5 months. The Postal Service does send a letter when someone files that. It goes to the old address. It's a plain envelope and it doesn't say much. Margo remembered it. She remembered opening something that winter that looked like junk, deciding it was junk, and putting it in the recycling with the grocery flyers. "I threw it away," she said. "I threw it away myself." So every statement she had, the logo, the account number, the modest quarterly gains, the neat stack in the accordion folder in her den, was paper a man had printed somewhere and carried to her door. There was one more thing in that folder. A beneficiary form, the kind that says who receives an account when the holder dies. It had been submitted in March, and the name on it was not any of her children's. Grady leaned over to look at it and said, "Maybe the office pulled the wrong form." Wes didn't move. "What office?" "The advisors. Nobody told you where that came from. Beau showed me their website once. For God's sake, Wes." Nobody pushed it. That interested me almost as much as the answer did. The room got loud after that. Tessa and Grady going at each other the way siblings do when what they want is to hit something else. I got up for water. Nobody noticed me leave. Nobody ever does. Grady was in the hallway by the coat hooks with his phone against his ear, half turned away, and he said, low, "I need more time. You know I don't have anything left to put up." Hi didn't see me. I brought the glasses in and set them down, then went into the powder room, shut the door, and wrote that sentence on the back of a grocery receipt from my purse. I folded it in four and put it in my pocket. I did not know what it meant. I only knew I was not going to be the person in this family who heard something and decided not to look at it. When I came out, Margo was sitting very straight at her own kitchen table with her hands flat on the wood. How many times was he in my house? Nobody answered. So she answered herself, out loud, slowly, the way you count stitches. The ice storm in January, the morning he carried the porch furniture up, the afternoon of the doctor's appointment, twice in April, the Saturday he fixed the screen door, 9 times in 5 months. Then my mother-in-law sat in the kitchen she had lived in for 41 years and said, in a voice I had never heard from her, "He knows which drawer I keep the sugar in." The text came in while I was folding laundry. I'm meeting him tonight. I need to hear him say it to my face. Don't tell Wes. I gave myself 3 seconds. There are moments in a family when loyalty means keeping somebody's confidence, and moments when keeping it would be idiotic, and you get about 3 seconds to decide which one you're in. I carried my phone into the living room and held it out. Wes read it twice. Then he set it face down on the arm of the couch and said, "I can't go." Wes, I reported the conflict the morning after the reunion. I'm off it. Other people have it now. He rubbed his hand over his face. If I walk into that restaurant, some defense attorney stands up 18 months from now and says the agent's family confronted the subject and contaminated everything. And he's right, and my mother gets nothing back. So you sit here. So I sit here. I drove her. Tessa didn't want to be driven, and I drove her anyway. Out to the waterfront place with the boats knocking together in the dark. And I parked where I could see the door and did not go in. I want to tell you what my husband was doing while I sat in that parking lot, because Tessa told me later, and it's the part I think about. He stood in our kitchen. He did not call anyone, because there was no one he was permitted to call. He did not drive out. He stood at the counter with his phone in his hand for 50 minutes. 22 years of being the man who knows first. And that night he was only allowed to wait. Like the rest of us. Here is what happened inside, in her words. Beau was already at the table. When she came toward him, he stood up. He pulled out her chair. And Tessa said the thing that has stayed with me, that it worked. That after 4 days of statements and mailboxes and her brother's face, some part of her went quiet and warm at a man standing up for her. That was the moment she got frightened. Not the paperwork, the chair. He had an explanation for everything, and every one of them was reasonable. The mail was the postal service. They get that wrong constantly. The beneficiary form was clerical. Offices pull the wrong document all the time. And if Ashford's people were sloppy, that was worth knowing. Her mother was a grown woman who'd made a conservative investment and hadn't wanted Wes auditing every decision she made. Could Tessa honestly blame her? Then he leaned back and went for the bruise. Your whole life, your brother has decided who you're allowed to trust. You made one decision without asking him, and he turned it into an investigation. She almost got up right then. She told me so, not because he was wrong, because he was too right, and she couldn't work out how a man she'd known 7 months knew exactly where to put his thumb. She made herself sit there. She asked him why he'd been going to her mother's house without telling her. Your mother asked me for help. She's my mother. She's also an adult. And then he said, easily, the way you say a number you've said before, look, she wasn't risking her whole future. It's $182,000. Tessa. The restaurant kept going around them. Somebody dropped a tray somewhere. How do you know that number? He reached for his water. You told me. I didn't. Then your mother did. She says she didn't. Then Ashford mentioned it at some point. I don't know. And Tessa said, why would my mother's financial advisor tell you how much my mother invested? He didn't have it ready. For the first time in 7 months, she watched him look for something. She stood up and picked up her bag. Sit down, he said. Let me explain it. She told me afterward that his voice changed on that sentence. Not louder, flatter, like a man setting down something he'd been carrying carefully and no longer needed to. She walked out. She got into my car and shut the door and did not cry. She looked out the window at the boats for a long time. And somewhere past the light on Route 155, she said, 7 months, he never asked me a single question about me. Not one. He only ever answered. 2 agents came to our house on a Wednesday. Not Wes. 2 people I had never met. A woman about my age and a younger man. Both polite, both carrying folders. They sat on my couch. They asked if they could record. A man had approached the wife and the daughter of a federal agent at a family gathering and asked what nights that agent traveled and what time his wife got home. That is not a private matter. That is a reportable incident, and it had been reported, and this was what reporting it looked like. They had me repeat Beau's 4 questions, all 4. Then they had me repeat them again in the order he'd asked them, which I hadn't realized mattered until I heard myself do it. They asked Junie the same question 2 different ways, 20 minutes apart. She noticed. She told me later she almost said you already asked me that, and then decided not to, which is the most 22-year-old thing I have ever heard. And then the woman closed her folder and said, Mrs. Halverson, what questions do you have for us? I want to be careful here. I asked them the things I had been asking my husband for 2 weeks. Not case details. I knew better than that by then. I asked whether my daughter should be worried. I asked whether we should change anything at the house. I asked whether the man had a history of anything violent. And they answered me, all 3, plainly. In about 90 seconds, sitting on my own sofa, Wes was 10 feet away in the chair by the window. He did not look at me once. Junie came downstairs after they left with her laptop open. His account's new, she said, made last August, 11 posts, and he doesn't tag anybody, not one person, until Aunt Tessa, Wes, took the laptop. He scrolled for a while. My daughter is 22 years old. She needed 4 minutes. The rest of us needed 5 months. The lab email came that Friday afternoon. The sangria was clean. No sedative, no drug, nothing on the panel at all. $285 to be told that a cup of wine was a cup of wine. I read it 3 times and then I laughed. And then I sat down on the stairs in my own front hall and put my hands over my face. And Wes came and sat down next to me, and neither of us said anything for a while. You stole a perfectly good drink, I said finally. It wasn't that good. You didn't taste it. I smelled it. Of course you did. For about 10 seconds, it was funny. Then it wasn't. Because here's the thing I understood. Sitting on those stairs, the drink was clean, but I still should not have taken it. What I accepted that afternoon was never wine. It was a conversation, a reason for a stranger to stand next to me for 90 seconds and ask 4 questions in a yard where I felt safe. And he got more out of that than anything he could ever have put in a glass. That night, I said the only hard thing I said to my husband in the whole of it. I'm not asking you to tell me about your work. I never have. I stopped asking in year 6, and I meant it. I know. But there was one sentence you were allowed to say. Wes. 1. It doesn't touch a file. It doesn't name anybody. It wouldn't cost you your badge. I waited until he looked up. Don't discuss money with people outside this family. That's it. You could have said that to your mother in January, and none of us would have known why. And she'd still have her mail. He didn't defend himself. He didn't qualify it. He didn't explain the regulation. And God knows he could have. He said, "You're right." That was all, and it mattered more than I expected it to. 2 days later, he came home while I was chopping onions and set his phone down on the counter beside the cutting board. They found where the information came from. I kept chopping. Beau, before Beau. He waited until I stopped. It started before he ever met Tessa. I set the knife down. Before Tessa? Then somebody told him about your mother first. Yes. Who? And my husband, who had spent 22 years learning how to say difficult things in a way that gave nothing away, looked at me across our kitchen and said, Grady, we met at Grady's house on a Sunday. Because there was nothing left to say over the phone. Roslyn was upstairs. We could hear her moving around. She knew by then that her husband had been hiding more than one thing. Wes sat across from him. This isn't an interview. People from my office already did that. I'm asking as your brother. Grady stared at the carpet. It wasn't what you think, Margo said. That sentence has never once been followed by good news. Nobody argued. Here is what came out over the next hour. 2 commercial customers paid him months late. Material costs went up. He carried payroll on a line of credit, then a second line, then the equipment loans, then the insurance. He kept thinking he could work through it. Then he borrowed more. Then he stopped telling Roslyn anything at all. Beau knew people who arranged private financing, Tessa said. You asked my boyfriend for money? That was before you and him. Last year, I asked about lenders. And here is the part I have thought about most. The lender wanted a personal guarantee. They wanted collateral. Grady had already pledged everything he owned. And Beau asked him a question any broker in America would ask, in the same flat voice, on any Tuesday. Is there anybody in the family who could stand behind it? Grady answered it as a man trying to save his business, not as a man betraying his mother. He gave the family's shape, the property, the sale. Who had what? I was not lying when he said he didn't know. That took me months to understand, and it is why this hurt the way it did. But then Wes said, How much did you take? Grady didn't answer. Grady, 60. He said it to the carpet. 19%. Tessa made a sound. It's a loan, he said. Not a finder's fee. I'm paying it back. Nobody in that room accepted the distinction. Then Wes put a phone on the coffee table. Margo's cousin had taken dozens of pictures at the reunion, the way people do. Beau appears in a photograph at 12:07. Tessa's car pulls into the driveway at 12:31. 24 minutes. You didn't bring him, Wes told his sister. He was already there. Tessa turned and looked at her older brother, the one who had defended him on speakerphone. I took the folded grocery receipt out of my purse and read what I'd written in Margo's powder room. I need more time. You know I don't have anything left to put up. Grady closed his eyes. When did you start wondering? I asked. He looked at Wes. Don't look at him. I'm asking. 4 months ago, he was getting too interested in Mom's accounts. 4 months, Tessa said. And you said nothing. What was I supposed to say? The man helping me find financing is asking questions I don't like. And by the way, my company is buried? Margo answered before anyone else could. Yes, Mom, Richard. That is exactly what you were supposed to say. Tessa's voice dropped. You watched my own brother look at me like I'd opened the door for a criminal, and you let me sit there thinking it was my fault. Grady had nothing. Then I said the thing I'd been carrying since the parking lot. Wes, you recognized that man from a photograph you looked at once, 3 years ago. He turned. You've had dinner with your brother every month for 20 years. For the first time since I'd met him, my husband did not have an answer that was technically correct. Upstairs, the footsteps stopped. All of us heard it. None of us looked up. There was one more thing, and it came later, through Wes's colleagues. Beau had known who Wes was before he ever spoke to Tessa. A family with a federal agent in it is the best cover a man like that can buy. Nobody questions the pleasant stranger introduced at the agent's own mother's table, and he knew exactly what kind of man Wes was. The kind who wouldn't say anything. His words. In the interview, I didn't avoid him. I picked him. Margo was quiet a long moment. Then she looked at her oldest son and said, without raising her voice, "I can forgive losing money, Grady, money I can lose. But you watched a man walk into my house 9 times while you already suspected him, and you said nothing, because saying it would have made you look foolish. I don't know yet what I'm going to do with that." They arrested Beau Prentice 6 weeks later, in a case much larger than ours. No handcuffs on anyone's lawn. I didn't need the theater. Grady was never charged. He cooperated and walked out with his record clean and nothing else intact. Rosalind learned the whole number. They started counseling. He sold 2 pieces of equipment, shrank the company to something he could actually carry, and told his sons what he'd been hiding, which I suspect was harder than any of it. Tessa went to therapy and told almost nobody. In a family that treats private business as a group project, I consider that health. Neil Ashford spent a morning calling 34 clients to ask whether they were, in fact, his. The lawyer read Margo the statute covering what was done to her. It protects vulnerable adults, and separately, anyone over 68. She set the paper down. "I am not vulnerable. I trusted the wrong man. Those are different things." "Legally, ma'am," he said gently. "They aren't." She didn't speak again for the rest of the appointment. Losing $182,000, she told me later, hadn't cost her a night's sleep. Those 2 words did. The federal side gave her a letter, a victim number, a coordinator's name, and a paragraph explaining the process can take years. That was all. So she hired her own attorney and went after the brokerage in arbitration because a change of address had been processed on an elderly account with no phone verification, a violation of their own compliance rules. She got back $112,000 of the $182,000. Then she found a fee-only fiduciary, flat fee, no commissions, and looked her up in the same public registry I'd used at that kitchen table before she ever picked up the phone. "Not Wes," she said. "I wanted the training without the emotional stake in running my life." The victim letter is on her refrigerator now, beside the grandchildren, not to remember the case. To remember she is on the record. Sunday dinner in September. Immediate family, no name tags, no cornhole, no 40 people. Junie brought wine. Wes turned the bottle to read the label. "Please tell me the Bureau finally cracked the Cabernet case." "I can't comment on an open investigation. It has a screw cap." Everybody laughed. Nobody said why that mattered. Grady pulled out his mother's chair. Margo looked at it a moment, then took a different one. Not angry, just not yet. Rosalind didn't come. Nobody explained. Nobody asked. I brought potato salad. I sat down before anyone offered me a chair. Afterward, Margo found me in the kitchen with a dish towel. "For years, I thought of you as Wes's wife." "I am Wes's wife." "You know what I mean." I did. They were never unkind to me. That's the part that's hard to explain. I was always invited, always welcomed. But there was a line between the people named Halverson and the people who married in. Wes handled the serious things, Grady the practical ones, Tessa the feelings. I brought potato salad. "Then stop treating me like company." She nodded. "All right." There's a notebook on my kitchen counter now. Mine. Wes saw it one morning and didn't say a word. He slid his pen across the counter toward me. For weeks, I thought this was a story about something I failed to see. It isn't. Beau Prentice never stole anything from my family. One at a time, we handed him the pieces. Grady handed him a number. Because he was trying to borrow money, Tessa handed him all of us. Because she wanted to be loved, Margo handed him her privacy. Because it was the last independent thing she had, Junie handed him an answer. Because she was raised to be polite to adults, Wes handed him silence. Because that was his job. And I handed him my pleasantness. I'd played the harmless wife for 19 years, so well a stranger spotted it from across a yard. Not one of us did anything wrong on the day we handed it over. I still bring the potato salad. I make it very well. I just ask more questions now. If there's an older person in your life living alone, do one thing this week. Ask when they last took their own mail out of their own mailbox with their own hands. And if this stayed with you, tell me in the comments, should Rosalind come back to the table? I honestly don't know. Subscribe for next week's story and pay attention to the people sitting around your own.